Hey there, welcome back to episode 2 of Learn with DreamWords. If you're here to improve your English listening skills and pick up some natural daily expressions, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into daily routines, a perfect way to practice real-life English. Don't forget to support the channel by liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications. Ready? Let's jump in.
Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive.
Ooh, deep dive into daily routines.
That's right. And how to talk about your day in English. You know?
Yeah, it's one of the most fundamental things that you learn when you learn any language, right?
Totally. And, even if you think you've got the basics down, there's always some new vocabulary or expression you can pick up.
Absolutely. And it can be a little intimidating sometimes for people to get started.
Yeah, definitely. But that's why we're here to break it down, make it fun.
Right. And usable. Yeah.
Exactly. So think about your typical Monday. How would you describe it to someone in English?
Well, you could start with something simple, like I always wake up at 8 o'clock on Mondays.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basic, but it gets the job done.
Yeah, exactly. But then you can add a little more detail. You could say, my alarm goes off at 8, but I usually hit the snooze button a few times.
Ooh, I like that. Adding a little personality.
Yeah, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone hits the snooze button, don't they?
Pretty much. And speaking of personality, our source material for this deep dive has some really interesting vocabulary for describing those everyday actions.
Absolutely. We've got subway to drive, even Saturday, all those good basic words.
Yeah, the building blocks of any good daily routine story.
Right. And don't forget those little words that connect everything: before, always, when.
Oh, yeah. Those are essential for putting actions in order and showing how often we do things.
It's like grammar comes alive with those little words.
I know, right? Yeah, it's not just about memorizing rules. It's about actually using them to communicate.
Exactly. And that's what makes language fun, when you start to see how it all works together.
For sure. So speaking of seeing how it all works together, our source material has some great example sentences that we can break down.
Yeah, like I always drive my car to work on Monday.
Okay, simple and to the point. You've already told someone a lot about your Monday morning.
Yeah, and it highlights how those adverbs of frequency, like always, can change the meaning of a sentence.
Right, because if you said, I sometimes drive my car to work on Monday, that paints a different picture.
Exactly. Maybe you take the bus sometimes or work from home.
Or maybe you bike, get some exercise in.
Oh, yeah, I got to get those steps in.
Now, here's another example from our source. On weekends, I never wake up before noon.
Ah, the classic weekend lie-in. I love it.
And notice how they use that preposition of time, on, to specify weekends.
Those prepositions are key. They can be tricky, but they're so important for creating clear sentences.
I know, right? Sometimes it feels like there are a million prepositions in English.
But once you get the hang of them, you'll see how much they add to your fluency.
Totally. And it's all about practice, right?
Yeah.
The more you use them, the more natural they become.
Absolutely. And you know what I love about those prepositions? They really help to paint a picture in the listener's mind. Like you can almost visualize someone sleeping in until noon on a sunny Saturday morning.
Aren't they right? It's like you're creating a little movie in their head with your words.
And speaking of creating pictures, you know what I find charming about English? The way it expresses time, like 1:45 for 15 minutes before the hour.
It is kind of unique, but I can see how it might confuse learners at first.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially when you have 1:15, meaning 15 minutes after.
It's like a mirror image almost.
Exactly. And sometimes those little quirks of language are the things that trip people up. But,
Yeah.
it's all part of the fun, right?
Absolutely. Figuring out those little puzzles is what makes language learning so rewarding.
And you know what else is rewarding?
What's that?
Trying out those fun fill-in-the-blank exercises. We have one in our source material, and it's a great way to see if you're really grasping all these concepts we've been talking about.
I love those. It's like a little test to see how much we're absorbing.
Exactly, and sometimes it's surprising how much you actually know, even if you don't feel super confident.
Okay, so are you ready for a challenge? Imagine you're reading a story about someone's Sunday routine, and the first sentence is, my favorite day of the routine is Sunday. What do you think goes in that blank?
My favorite day of the... Okay, so we need a word that makes sense with day and Sunday.
That's right. It's all about context clues.
I'm going to go with week. My favorite day of the week is Sunday.
You got it. It fits perfectly, both grammatically and in terms of the meaning.
Awesome. See, this is fun already.
I know, right? And we're just getting started. Now the sentence continues. I wake up at 8. Think about how we express time in English.
Okay, we know it's 8 o'clock. Do we just say 8, or is there another word we need?
Good question. We'll give you a moment to ponder while we take a quick break.
All right, I'm going to say o'clock. I wake up at 8 o'clock. It just sounds right, doesn't it?
You nailed it. It's those little words that can make all the difference in sounding natural and fluent.
I know. It's amazing how much meaning we pack into these seemingly simple phrases.
Right. It's like we're unlocking a secret code to the language. Okay, so the sentence goes on. I have breakfast at 7:30. This one's a little trickier. Remember those 7:45 and 7:15 phrases we talked about?
I see where you're going with this. We're talking about a time that's after 8 o'clock, so the missing word must be past. I have breakfast at 8:30.
Brilliant. You're a natural at this. See how we're slowly building a whole narrative just by filling in these blanks?
It's amazing how these simple words can come together to create a story. And I'm already curious to see what happens next in this person's Sunday routine.
Me too. But we'll have to save that for the next part of our deep dive. Okay, so last time we left off with our fill-in-the-blank story about a Sunday routine. Where were we?
Right. I have breakfast at 8:30. I'm ready for the next sentence.
All right, here it is. I take our dog for a walk in the park, breakfast. Think about the sequence of events here.
Okay, so we need a word that shows what happens after breakfast.
It's all about creating a timeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would logically come next?
After. It has to be after. I take our dog for a walk in the park after breakfast.
Yes, you're on fire. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle of this person's day.
I know, right? And each little word is a clue. What's next?
Okay, the next part is, I play with the dog from breakfast lunch. So this time, we need a word that shows how long the dog playing lasts.
Ooh, this is interesting. It's not just about a single action. It's about a period of time.
Exactly. We need a preposition that shows something continuing up to a specific point.
I think I've got it. Until. I play with the dog from breakfast until lunch. That makes perfect sense.
Perfect. You're really getting the hang of these prepositions.
They're starting to feel less intimidating now.
That's great to hear. Okay, are you ready for the next one?
Hit me with it.
Here it is. We eat lunch with Tim's parents on Sundays. Now think back to those adverbs of frequency we discussed earlier.
Adverbs of frequency.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to indicate how often they have lunch with Tim's parents.
Right. And the sentence gives us a pretty big clue.
It does. It says on Sundays, which implies every Sunday, so it has to be always. We always eat lunch with Tim's parents on Sundays.
You're a natural at this. It seems like this person has a pretty consistent Sunday routine.
It's like clockwork. It makes me wonder what they do after lunch.
Well, luckily the story tells us the next sentence is, Tim and I like to walk around the city after lunch. We visit museums or go to cafes.
Okay, so this suggests that they don't always visit museums or go to cafes. We need a word that shows something happens sometimes, but not all the time.
Right. And remember, we have a few options for expressing that idea.
Let me see. Occasionally. No, that doesn't quite fit.
Think about what we've learned about adverbs of frequency.
Okay, I think I've got it. Sometimes. Tim and I like to walk around the city after lunch. Sometimes we visit museums or go to cafes.
You got it. Those adverbs really help us to fine-tune the meaning of our sentences.
It's like adding a little bit of spice to our language.
Okay, and now for the final sentence of our story. We always have dinner in a restaurant on Sundays. I love weekends.
That's a nice way to end the day. A relaxing dinner out.
I know, right? It sounds like a pretty perfect Sunday. And notice how the story came full circle. It started with loving Sundays and ended with that same feeling.
It's like a little mini adventure, all packed into one day.
Exactly. And we managed to piece it together just by filling in those blanks. It's amazing how much we can learn from a simple exercise like that.
It really shows how all those grammar and vocabulary pieces fit together in a real-world context.
Speaking of real-world contexts, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that takes up a big part of most people's daily routines. Work.
Yes, the daily grind. I'm curious to see what insights our source material has about that.
Well, it has a couple of interesting sentences that illustrate how routines can change depending on the job. One of them is, I always wake up at 8 o'clock on Wednesday.
Okay, so we've already talked about expressing time and using adverbs of frequency, but this sentence doesn't explicitly mention work.
That's right. We kind of have to read between the lines and infer that they're talking about their work routine based on the context.
It's like a little mystery we have to solve. And it highlights that we don't always have to spell everything out in conversation.
Exactly. Sometimes the meaning is implied, and it's up to the listener to make those connections.
It makes conversation more dynamic, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's like a little dance between the speaker and the listener. Now, the other sentence related to work is quite different. They fly to Spain on weekdays.
Wow, that sounds like a much more exciting job. Maybe a pilot or a business person who travels a lot.
Right. It just goes to show how diverse work routines can be. Some people have structured schedules, while others have more flexibility or travel involved.
It's a good reminder that we can use these basic daily routine phrases and vocabulary to describe all sorts of work situations.
Absolutely. Whether you're a student, a stay-at-home parent, or a globe-trotting entrepreneur, there are ways to talk about your daily activities in English.
It's all about adapting those basic building blocks to fit your own unique routine. And speaking of adapting, have you ever noticed how thinking about work routines can actually help you expand your vocabulary?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many different verbs and nouns associated with various professions. You could talk about attending meetings, writing reports, giving presentations, and so much more.
It's like opening a door to a whole new world of specialized vocabulary. And the more words you have at your disposal, the more fluent and confident you'll sound.
Speaking of sounding confident, are you ready for another pronunciation power-up?
Always. What have we got this time?
Well, our source material reminds us to keep practicing that I sound we talked about earlier, especially in words like Monday, Saturday, and Subway.
Those are good ones to practice. I know a lot of learners struggle with that I sound.
It's definitely one of the trickier vowel sounds in English. But it also points out that even the word saying itself can be a bit of a tongue twister because of that I sound.
Oh, that's interesting. And then there are words like Wednesday and Spain, which have those subtle vowel sounds that can trip people up.
It's true. Those little nuances in pronunciation can be tricky to master, but they make a huge difference in clarity and fluency.
Absolutely. And you know what's really helpful for practicing pronunciation? Recording yourself.
That's such a good tip. Hearing yourself speak allows you to identify areas where you might need to focus your attention. It's like having your own personal pronunciation coach right there in your pocket.
Exactly. So grab your phone or computer, record yourself reading some of those practice sentences from our source material, and then listen back. You might be surprised at what you hear.
And remember, don't be too critical of yourself. It's all about progress, not perfection. The more you practice, the more natural those sounds will become.
Practice makes perfect, as they say, or at least it makes us better.
Exactly. And on that note of self-improvement, I want to highlight one last exercise from our source material that I think is really valuable.
I'm all ears. What is it?
It's all about reflection. It encourages us to go back to the beginning and think about our goals for this lesson. What do we want to learn? What are we feeling confident about? And are there any areas where we'd like to focus our practice moving forward?
That's such a great idea. It's so easy to get caught up in the learning process and forget to take a step back and reflect on our progress.
I know, right? It's like hiking a mountain trail.
Yeah.
You're so focused on putting one foot in front of the other that you forget to stop and admire the view.
I love that analogy. So let's take a moment to admire the view. What are some of the highlights of this deep dive for you? What stood out?
For me, it was those aha moments when we were filling in the blanks and everything just clicked. Like, oh, that's how those grammar rules work. Or, wow, I can actually understand this passage now. It's incredibly rewarding to see how all those pieces fit together.
I totally agree. And for me, it was realizing how much I already know. Sometimes I get so caught up in what I don't know that I forget to appreciate how far I've come. It's a good reminder to celebrate those wins, no matter how small they may seem.
And on the flip side, it's also okay to acknowledge the areas where we're still struggling. Maybe there's a particular grammar rule that still feels confusing, or a pronunciation sound that we just can't seem to master.
Absolutely. It's all part of the learning process. The key is to identify those areas and make a plan for how to tackle them. Whether it's finding a tutor, practicing with a language partner, or just dedicating a little extra time to those tricky bits, there's always a way to keep moving forward.
Well said. It's a journey, not a race.
Yeah.
Right? Speaking of journeys, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. From practicing conversations to exploring those tricky prepositions and adverbs, and even fine-tuning our pronunciation. It's been a whirlwind of language learning. Welcome back to our deep dive. You know, it's amazing how much we've already learned about talking about our day in English.
I know, right? And we're not even done yet.
That's right. We still have some more ground to cover, some more gems to unearth.
Unearth, I like that. It's like we're on a treasure hunt for the perfect phrases.
Exactly. And speaking of treasure, our source material has this really cool section that talks about reflecting on our learning journey, identifying the most difficult and easiest aspects of the lesson.
Oh, yeah, I love that part. It's so important to take a step back and really think about what we've learned and what we still need to work on.
Totally. It's like taking inventory of our linguistic toolbox. Seeing what tools we have and what tools we might still need.
And figuring out how to use those tools effectively, right? Because just having the tools isn't enough.
Exactly. We need to know how to wield them like a pro.
Like a linguistic ninja.
Okay, so let's put on our ninja gear and think back on this deep dive. What were some of the aha moments for you? What really clicked?
For me, it was those adverbs of frequency. You know how they can subtly change the whole meaning of a sentence?
Yeah, like always versus sometimes can make a big difference.
Huge difference. And those prepositions, too, they can be tricky, but once you get them, they add so much depth to your sentences.
It's like they're the secret ingredient to fluency. Once you add them, everything just tastes better.
I love that analogy. And you know what else was really helpful?
What's that?
Those fill-in-the-blanks exercises. They really made me think about how all the pieces fit together.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like putting together a puzzle and seeing the image emerge.
And sometimes you get a piece wrong and you have to try again, but that's all part of the learning process.
Totally. It's those mistakes that help us grow and improve.
Speaking of growing and improving, what are some areas where you'd like to focus your practice moving forward?
For me, it's those tricky pronunciation sounds. Like the subtle differences between saying and Spain. I think I need to spend some more time with those.
Yeah, those can be tough. I know I still mix them up sometimes.
It's all about practice, though. The more you hear and repeat the sounds, the easier it becomes.
And don't forget about recording yourself. It's a great way to hear how you really sound and identify areas where you can improve.
That's a good tip. And speaking of tips, what are some resources that you would recommend for people who want to keep practicing their daily routine vocabulary and grammar?
Well, there are tons of great websites and apps out there. Duolingo, Babbel, Memrise, those are all good places to start.
And don't forget about real-life conversations. Talk to your friends, your family, your colleagues, anyone who speaks English.
Exactly. The more you use the language, the better you'll get.
It's like working out a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes.
And remember, it's okay to make mistakes. It's all part of the process.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to experiment, to try new things, to put yourself out there.
The more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
Well said. And you know what's truly amazing about learning a new language? It opens up a whole new world of connections and experiences.
Absolutely. You can talk to people from different cultures, different backgrounds. It's like a passport to a whole new world.
And speaking of passports, our source material leaves us with a really interesting question that I want to share with you. What unique aspect of your daily routine could you teach someone else in English?
Ooh, I love that. It's like a challenge to find something special about our everyday lives, something that we might take for granted, but that could be fascinating to someone else.
Exactly. It could be anything from your morning ritual to your bedtime routine.
Or even something as simple as how you make your tea or coffee.
The point is to think about what makes your routine unique and share that with the world.
And to use English as a bridge to connect with others.
So on that note, I want to encourage everyone to keep exploring, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep having fun with English.
It's a journey filled with challenges and rewards, and we're here to help you every step of the way.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into daily routines.
Until next time, happy language learning, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope today's episode helped you feel more confident in your English listening and gave you some useful phrases for your own daily life. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might want to improve their English too. Your support means a lot, and it helps me keep bringing you more helpful content. Until next time, keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next episode.